VenomousStare returns with a StarCraft 2 commentary. This time we have something exciting because this is a 2v2 game that I played, and I dropped this witticism on my ally. I knew when I saw you lose 5 workers to a Reaper, we were doomed. And we're in an insurmountable disadvantage this game, up here in the red, and we do end up losing. But I PM the guy, my ally, that I lost with afterwards, and here's the conversation. I noticed that he's playing unranked, which is just an incredibly common thing amongst people griefing or being worthless. And then he immediately says 1v1 me, which, by the way, if you're a StarCraft player and someone's running their mouth to you, this is what you do. Challenge them to a 1v1. It's a 1v1 game. It's how you prove your mettle against someone, as opposed to just copy-pasting retarded stuff at them, or being a coward, challenging someone to a 1v1 and then backing out, which is behavior that we see all the time from the Confed clan and the iDrunk clan, two organizations comprised almost exclusively of spineless cowards with bad macro. This is how you're supposed to do it. You say 1v1, and look what happens. Bro 1v1 me, and I had just gotten in a match, so I say I will, but I just got in a game, I'll invite you when I'm done. Now, there's been a lot of situations where someone will say 1v1 me when they notice you get into a game, and then you leave, and then they refuse to 1v1 you, which is what I was expecting. So I said, yeah, I'll invite you when I'm done, and then when I invite you, you can make your excuse and decline. And then he goes, I'll wait, I won't start another game, I'll wait for you to be done with yours so we can 1v1. So at this point I'm thinking to myself, okay, he's legit, and he wasn't really flaming that much in game. His macro was bad, and I noticed that when he was microing across the map, he couldn't ever look back at his base. And whenever you play with someone, you will notice things way more frequently than if you play against them. Obviously, because you have full vision of the space. So when he says, I'll wait, I'm like, oh, holy shit. So then I go proxy Stargate and we win, and I invite him, and that's the game that I got in after. Yeah, that's what I wanted it to expand even more. So this is the 2v2 after, and here's the 1v1 we play. So it's a best of 3, and naturally I picked Daybreak because Daybreak is this tried and true, old school, battle tested macro map. And if you're going to decide who's better at the game, you want to pick a legit standard macro map. And if you look at the history of StarCraft 2 esports, it's this map and Belshir Vestige are probably the two most commonly played maps. If you just look at sheer number of professional matches played in StarCraft and rank them by map, Daybreak and Belshir are probably 1 and 2. So this is a really common map. And the reason it's so common and got played so heavily is it's just your standard, tried and true, cookie cutter map. 2 towers in the middle that aren't overpowered, a third that you can take here or in the center, and easy to take natural with no insanely abusive cannon spots, easy to defend main. I mean, this is a map that has produced countless classics, but also a map that at the very end of its lifespan, people were sort of sitting there like, wow, we're kind of tired of watching games on Daybreak. And people felt that way about Belshir too at the end of that map's life. So these games, whenever I play grudge matches against people that I dislike, I almost never go for cheeses or all-ins as a plan, and I almost just always try to play standard, tried and true, Greg Idrefield style macro Zerg. Because ultimately when someone challenges you to a 1v1, what they're really saying is they think they're better than you at the game, and in many ways in StarCraft they think they're better than you as a person. So to go for a weird, cheesy strategy when that's something that I don't normally do would sort of defeat the purpose of saying that I'm better than this guy and making fun of him in 2v2 for losing 5 fucking workers to 1 Reaper. And it wasn't like, oh, you lost 5 workers to a Reaper, like I take too much damage from Reapers too sometimes. It was that he was like harassing with his Reaper across the map to like unmoving probes, and while he was losing his workers, not microing, the person he was facing was doing the same thing, so just a big joke really. Another interesting thing about 1v1ing people that you just played a 2v2 with is oftentimes they will go for the same style, the same builds. So in that last game, this guy went for Reaper expand into like this really terrible bio macro build where essentially he went like 1-1-1 and then added like 6 racks at once. Meaning whenever we got attacked by 2-1-1 and 2 Robo Colossus, we got fucked in the ass, just ruthlessly, insidiously, brutally, because it didn't have any fucking production. You have to scale up your production as Terran. You can't just make all of your barracks at once. Now, you do barracks explosions, where you're macroing throughout the game, and then you might add like 3 racks here, 2 racks here, but there's never a scenario in which you're like on 3 bases, you're floating a shitload of money, and you're like, alright, I'm going bio, 7 minutes in, time to add racks is 2 through 7. And we can see, hilariously, he loses his first Reaper. So the defining factor of this player is, it's not like his macro is absolutely atrocious, or he gets supply blocked all the time, or he can't micro. He's not good at the multitask and juggling of looking at his army and looking back at his base when he's being harassed. In general, Terran players are not good at this, as you can see he was putting his CC down. He's going for what I like to call the innovation build, very fast 3cc behind Hellions, and this is just an incredibly good macro build to use against Zerg if you're a Terran player. And in the same way that I'm going for a very committed macro build, this guy is going for a very committed macro build. And notice his third started before mine, which is pretty cool if you're the Terran. One interesting deviation for standard Zerg macro play that I've adapted into my play within the last year is after I take my natural and get my ling speed. Oh, I have my head so far up my ass, sorry. Okay, so I kill the Reaper, and I see this Marine here with my Overlord, and I know that he doesn't have a bunker down here, and he's going to have trouble if I come in with lings, and he's not going to be able to see it because he lost the Reaper. A big part of the Reaper is simply preventing your opponent from being able to keep you in the dark and flooding you. So if you kill the Reaper, suddenly your opponent's in the dark and you have the option to be obnoxious. And I'm going to try to click on the SCV here, and for whatever reason, my idiot Zerglings don't target correctly, but he has to cancel anyway because he doesn't have any bio units for the bunker. And this is just such a tremendous pain in the ass as Terran. You can come in at these weird timings against Terran and really screw them up, because a lot of what Terran does as far as their builds is predicated upon, okay, well, I'm going to have pressure across the map and really prevent the Zerg from coming over and fucking with me. That's why we see Hellion openers, that's why we see Reaper openers. Map control is really important against Zerg, because you don't want their fucking creep spread to go wild anyway. And here, well, I'm going to do the intelligent thing. I've gained an economy advantage by making him lift his natural and really stunting his production. So I'm going to put a ling behind his natural, a ling at his third, a ling at both the towers, and I'm going to gain map control and drone like crazy behind this. The foolish thing to do whenever you see Hellions like this is, well, I did a little bit of damage, so I'm just going to keep making lings, do a ling ban all in into Hellions. That's how you fall behind after falling ahead. There's this old adage that Artosis would always say in the early days of GSL, when you're ahead, get more ahead. And this essentially means when you incur an advantage through an attack, you macro behind it. You get ahead with upgrades, with workers, with expansions. Get more ahead does not, when you're ahead, get more ahead does not mean once you do damage to someone, keep attacking. Because in the early days of GSL, as we've seen on my Venomous Classic series, people were obsessed with these attack-heavy, pressure-heavy styles, and Terran players especially didn't know when to get their foot off the gas and stop going back in that day. It was just one pressure into another, And we see stylistically that some Terran players have been able to sort of mold and groom that style into a more modern sort of approach, as Hellions are going to fly out on the map after a Pult Viking kills an Overlord. You should always shift A move your Pult Viking. You know an Overlord's going to be here, you know one's going to be here, you probably know one's going to be here. No reason to ever have this Pult Viking idle. Hellions are going to come in here, and I have lings down low for a flank, but my creep spread is not good at all. Something that I didn't really do a very good job of this game, so obviously one of the most important things as far as creep goes is to connect your natural to your third, and as soon as I get layer tech, this Overlord is going to start dropping creep to help me do that. And I can see he's going for a Liberator here. So anytime you scout someone who's gone for Viking and their starport still doesn't have a reactor and then go Liberator, you know they're going to be going for a harassment-based style. Because what essentially this means is the Pult Viking is here to clear out Overlords and open up drop paths, which is a beautiful move. Intelligent players make this Viking all the time. You see more Hellion poking here. As I'm doing that awkward thing where I desperately want to kill the Hellions with Speedlings, but he's just going to keep kiting, so I have to run. In general, this is how you want to play against 5+ Hellions. You stay on creep, continue to push your creep spread out, and You want to lead forward with the queens in engagements, make them commit and then hit with lings, or especially flank with lings. Here, the Liberator that I knew was coming is going to initiate its harass, and unfortunately for me, the 2 drones pop right when it does, so I do lose a few workers. And this guy tries to like come back in thinking I'll run away, and I just chase him down. If you're going to do a play like that, you got to shift click it like way further out and come back later. You can't just like deke and run back in. It's never going to affect your opponent. So here, this is a bad mistake. The point of this Overlord is to be creep dropping this 3rd base, thus delaying and scouting the taking of the 3rd base. And Terran players, see I did it a second late, which is brutal. Terran players love to just mule hammer this 3rd when it comes down because their natural and their main is starting to mine out and they have all this excess energy. And if we pull up the income tab, despite the fact that I'm ahead in workers significantly, the Terran player is going to occur a bit of an advantage here. This is very, very common, and this is why delaying the 3rd is so important, because if you can delay that power spike, it has a cascading effect on their barracks explosion, on their 2-2 upgrades, on their factory units they're going to have with their big 2-2 push. It's just so important. And in general, one concept that we're going to see in this game is that some players are very good at pushing and harassing you and keeping you on the back foot, but those players will often be the most vulnerable to counterattacks, because part of why they're so good at being on your side of the map and being annoying is they're exclusively focused on that. So if you split their focus with counterattacks, you can get an advantage. And here we see a bit of a swing in, killing the workers at the 3rd, and unfortunately for me, I didn't get all the mules while they were active, which would have just been devastating. Like, if he did this and I had lings out here, right when that Overlord late drop creep, and I could have run in and killed the mules immediately, that would have been way better. But as it stands, if you look at the income tab, I'm a little bit ahead of where you would normally want to be as Zerg, because in general you're going to want to be like 5 to 7 workers ahead of Terran as well as a base up. Everyone knows that just because of how the races work. His 1-1 is about to finish. My upgradeds are a little bit scuffed and disjointed, but my mutas are coming out. And this is just the standard Greg Fields mutiling Baneling style that allows you to take the absolute most advantage of your multitasking, macro, and ability to overwhelm your opponent with mechanics. Basically, I'm going to be creep spreading like crazy, injecting all these hatches at once, and microing mutas and lings on 2 fronts. So this is just an incredibly standard TVZ maneuver. The initial point where you reveal your mutas are their biggest power spikes, so what you want to do is hit the mutas with one spot and then have your other army on the opposite side of the map, your ground army, ready to swing in. What's going to happen is this guy's going to see mutas. He's going to bring his whole heckin' army over into his main to defend, stem the whole thing, panic the shit, and what you do not want to do here is fight. You want to stay just close enough to make him know that you're going to come in and backstab him as soon as he leaves. So even though he left a handful of mines, that's a absolute far cry from a full wall in a tank. And again, the 3rd mineral line is going to be aggressed upon. And once you get to this point, when it's like 68 drones to still 2 base saturation from Terran, you're really going to start incurring an advantage. Because Terran, as they fall behind, is going to be just more desperate to mule hammer that 3rd to catch back up. So what's going to happen is, it's sort of swingy for Terran. They really need this to catch back up, but it's also a vulnerability. You'll notice like a lot of good aggressive Terran players, if you look at the replay and watch from their point of view, a lot of what they do is sort of like unprotected, and they're almost just like assuming or hoping that you're not going to be able to deal with it. So here we're seeing what we call the fuck it push, where one player is unable to deal with harass and feels either too frustrated or as though they have incurred a disadvantage, so they simply get incredibly frustrated and push across the map. Now let's just look at his side of the map. His main, his add-ons have been clipped pretty bad, his main has been pretty hollowed out, and this is what you want to do with players who do a fuck it push. Assuming you don't need to bring your mutas back to hold, you just want to kill the workers if possible and then camp the reinforcement path in production, because whenever you play against aggressive players like this, you want for them to be a clock on them. You don't want them to just be able to infinitely push you while they're mining. This is the key to playing against people like this, is doing counters like this. This is another key to playing against people like this, is creep spread. Liquid TLO once said that creep spread was the most important element of TVZ, and this is why. Notice how this bozo that's been just spam muling to get any semblance of income doesn't have energy to clean up my scan. He doesn't have the energy to scan to clean up creep. I mean, there's one scan, but he's still just surrounded in creep. And here we're going to see a bit of a Mutiling Baneling engagement come forward as he's heavily on the creep. And the Mutiling Baneling just slams forward into his army. And notice I was move commanding the Banelings there until I just had a crushing advantage and they could pretty much crash into anything. But never going to win that fight off of creep as Terran, and I could have delayed for another 30 seconds and come in with the queens if I really wanted to, so he was really screwed. What did we see? We sneak into the natural and decimate that base. I've done significant damage to the main mineral line and snapped the add-ons. This is one common thing that Terrans will do, is like when all their stuff pops out at once, they'll stem and start to focus to make a stand. You just want to pick these add-ons off. They're low HP, they're priority targets, and in order to rebuild them it takes time, but more importantly guys, like, you're going to have to sit there and not use that Rax, and that add-on's going to be vulnerable, so you can run in and snipe it again and get the money again. So bread and butter again, Zerg tactic, hit the main with mutas, hit the base where he's not going to be with Lings. And let's just go to income here, as 5 freaking workers. So with mules, it's like 30 workers, Kipo, and we can see I'm going to try to snipe down the 2-2. Whenever you're prioritizing stuff to attack with mutas, as we see he had some mines out here in my retreat path. Whenever you're prioritizing stuff with mutas, workers, add-ons, upgrades, those are your 3 top priorities. And he's going to do the second phase of his fuck it push, but see, in a normal TBZ, if I hadn't killed all those workers and all the add-ons, this guy would have had momentum, and this would have been a irritating strategy where he was going to continue to be and reinforce and choke me out. But here all I have to do is wait for my Banes, and that was a bit of a mistake to run in, but here we go. I just really need to not run off creep into mines either, and I kill half his army there, and holy shit, he has a bunch of mines, and I lose a bunch of my ground force, but I know that's okay because this is pretty much it as far as his army goes. He's completely run out of steam, his reinforcement path is being camped. I know because I killed his E-Bays, I'm cooking him in upgrades. And here he'll try to focus fire Banes, but he just doesn't have the army. The Queens comes over and he GG's. So just to, some closing thoughts on that game, as far as like what did I do, what did I not do. We got a bunch of drones. We scouted him and saw he was going Hellion and then Pult Viking, which usually, not always, but kind of read like Bio. He played like Bio before. Then we used our mutas to incur an initial advantage, which we parlayed to incur another advantage at his third, at which point we were ahead. And then we continued with muta harass until he was so vexed he did a bad attack. It's not, well, people do bad attacks like this a lot if you're good. If you're good and you feel infallible and you're really frustrating to play against, which are all the things you freaking look for as Zerg, or I guess any race, but mostly Zerg, yeah, people are going to do fuck it pushes against you. And really what you have to know is you want to put a timer on them so it just doesn't become like a death parade push. And what you really want to do is put them in a situation where they have to commit all the way up into your natural, very, very deep onto creep where they can't retreat, and then at that point, after you have held out as absolutely long as possible, that's when you attack. The bad player will see the push out here off creep, panic, and A-move all of his lings in, and they'll die, and then you can't actually make enough lings to defend the push. Remember, as Zerg, we want to delay, delay, delay. Really, if we think about the use of the mutas, they're really not as much to kill workers as they are to get us map control and try to make the Terran player retreat. Because as Zerg players, if we go for Roach-centric strategies, Roach-Hydra strategies, that's a really bad way to play in general, to say I'm going to make all these mediocre Zerg units that I can't micro, that aren't good in a heads-up engagement, that aren't good at defending, and I'm just going to A-move the shit out of you. That's why Roach Ravager builds are so stupid to play against and so irritating. Because if we look at how Roach plays scales into the mid-late game, or Roach Hydra, whether it be against mech or bio, it's just garbage. It's a composition where you're not putting yourself in a position to show off your skill or your multitasking. It's, I'm going to move my big, slow, shitty army into your good army that you actually have the ability to micro and make good tech units for. I just don't like their styles. I think as a player you're way better off and can pressure your non-Zerg opponent way more with mutiling based styles. And in general that's a very snowbally style. We saw after I ran in at the main initially, really fucked him up when it came to the third hit. After that, even though it looked a little testy for me at times, it really wasn't. Whenever you play people like this who push, and are just myopically focused on attacking, you really have to consider that they're going to keep attacking, and they're not going to be able to defend well. So force them to defend and make them attack onto creep and make them commit with their attack. You don't want to have creep out to here and he have a bunch of mine tank out here and you run down off creep. That's the opposite of what you want to do. You want to engage upon your opponent whenever they are ideally sitting on your creep, but whenever you can really clean the army up and don't have to fight and get kited into a bunch of tech units off creep. So I see here just another basic expansion, and I'm really just assuming he's going to do Hellion macro again. After playing 2 times with this guy, I'm very convinced that he's the sort of player that will stylistically do the same type of builds and isn't really a guy who is gonna like 2 racks. Like a lot of these people in 2v2, you can kind of deduce like this is a cheesy guy, I better check for 2 racks, but this guy doesn't really rub me that way. He's like yet to flame me at all, and in general people that play these more macro committed styles aren't really as obnoxious as your cheesy players. I don't know what the hell this is. Maybe he's thinking I'm gonna do Lings again. This is really weird. I didn't notice this initially. So this is presumably a very interesting deviation where in the previous game, because I killed the Reaper, I kept my opponent on the back foot and was able to make a swell of Lings, catch him off guard, and get an economy advantage. And here, notice he's not nearly as aggressive with his Reaper. He gets a Marine after, again, but he keeps it in the wall as opposed to out here hunting for OVs. And notice how he brought his Reaper back. It's actually not the right thing to do. The correct thing to do is like keep it over here and just micro it. Don't be an idiot who loses the 1 unit you have to micro just because you want to make a CC. But he's going to rescout with it, so it's okay. But honestly, if you're like Bronze League or Silver League and you know your opponent's going to be aggressive or you think he's going to be aggressive, bringing your Reaper to your high ground of your main is a hell of a lot better than losing it out on the map. And since his inability to micro with or against Reapers was sort of the genesis of our disagreement, I find it funny the way that the Reaper was used in both these games. So a little bit of an adjustment for me. I've taken my quick third as before, but I've opted for a spine. If you do 1 spine crawler in your early mid-game defense against Hellion-centric strategies, your win-loss record will go way up in terms of you're never going to have these games where the Terran makes like 8 Hellions and you're like, oh shit, he's here, and you just lose 20 drones and die. Back in the day we would see Zergs lose like that all the time, and whenever Terran made Hellions it was almost like an exciting thing, like how is Zerg going to defend it? That was back when the Queen had 3 range and had worse range against air and was just a way worse unit in general. Now Zergs really aren't nearly as flimsy. You can make a bunch of Queens and be safe from almost every build, as you see another Pult Viking. As far as like early mid-game cheese goes, Queens are going to be good against almost everything. Hellbats, Banshees, 2-1-1. So the Queen is just an incredible catch-all unit that as Zerg, no matter how good you are, you're just probably not making enough of. And here we can see me, Debbie Down syndrome, fucking slant fuck my upgrades up. Hopefully I can drop the creep once my lair finishes. That was a mistake from last game I hope to rectify. We can see pretty much identical builds. Early fast 3cc, and of course Hellion. And he's going bio behind it. What the hell is this music? There we go. So again, after I make the initial Lings, I don't saddle them at my base. I got 1 in each third, 1 in front of his nat, and the 6 Hellions are out. Now this spine is just going to sort of be the anchor defense because it's going to be between my natural and my third, and it's just going to make things way easier. One of the easiest ways to lose games is to have Hellions run in and really fuck you when you're not expecting it, but the spine really helps that not happen. And the gaggle of Queens here is going to defend this 3-pronged harass, the Viking, Liberator, Hellion, and we can see here he's going to look around for the third. See, okay, well he hasn't taken another base over there, and I don't want to deal with what could potentially be lurking here as far as Lings go and the spine. So because the Queens were over here defending the third, the spine was able to supplement the defense, which is why you want to have the spine. The spine isn't going to hold like 10 blue flame Hellions running in alone, but it'll help a hell of a lot. And if someone does go for that sort of strategy, you can bounce the spine back and do a wall in here with the queen to be hard, and then just basically isolate, solo defend both bases. Thankfully, I remember to drop creep on the third. This is just profoundly annoying. Although this is the normal third for Terrans, just because they're going to do this, they're going to lift it off. Notice how late these guys' racks are. Like a good Terran player will have these racks up a bit earlier and have them powering up, will also be more diligent on upgrades. This is what separates even, like, you can have Terran players that can both micro well, but this is the difference between having like a good player that can macro behind it and just a guy who's more of like an aggressive Marine King style player whose entire strategy and tactical concept of the game is attack, 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 keep Zerg on the back foot, attack, doesn't matter what he has, doesn't matter the creep spread, doesn't matter the map, you just keep attacking. And a lot of Terrans play like this, and they can be incredibly hard to deal with because as Zergs we're not used to keeping up with the rapidity of the injects and the relentlessness of those pressures. So unfortunately for me, this map was his pick, Daybreak was mine obviously. So this is one of these ladder maps that people who are not necessarily old school, they're way more familiar with, and this map is sick for Terran. Super disgusting, easy to defend third base. Right here, Terrans want to have like everything rallied to one spot in their base and be able to rally everything out and have it also deal with counterattacks. So this is perfect for this guy, because he's in a situation where how am I gonna ever attack into him? There's literally one spot, the other one's walled. And if you're gonna do walls like this, which you should as Terran, it's always baller to leave a mine or two behind these walls, because Zergs will try to counter them when they get desperate. And that, see, like, remember in game 1 at his third when he just had 3 mines? If you have 3 mines in addition to a wall in, it becomes infinitely harder to break as Zerg. The wall itself is annoying, the mines itself are annoying, but in conjunction with each other they're incredible. So I'm just desperately trying to spread as much creep as possible here. This is sort of a big map that's not that good for creep spread. As I kill a turret there, it has too many hills, too many rocks, too much bullshit. Really, the maps that you want to creep spread on are the ones where there's like not very many ramps and rocks and you can just let it fly. Also, like, whenever stuff climbs up ramps and goes down ramps and there's all these weird areas like that never in a pro game do you ever see units down here in the spot? No. These maps are harder to creep spread on. So here my opponent is in a way better position than he was initially. He knows what my tactics are, he scouted my tactics, he's familiar with my build, the mutas have already been revealed, didn't do much damage, and now the turrets get up. And I'm in a situation where I'm going to try to do Ling Bane aggression, but he's dropping me now. Notice he's defending way better, macroing way better, and also being aggressive as he defends. And how in the hell am I supposed to attack this guy? Into here with all the mines? Into here with all the turrets? The only other place I can deduce is the natural. And a big part of mutiling Baneling is, like I said before, whenever you harass with your mutas, you want to do something else with your lings. I remember a great Idra quote where he once was talking about a Terran player he played against, and the Terran player kept trying to do like drop harass in the mid game, and he would just bring like one medevac in and drop his main, and then like a minute later he'd drop his third. And Idra said, a good player isn't going to be phased by single prong drop harass, even if you do it consistently. In order to do damage and snowball the game, what you need to do is do multi-prong drop harass, and that always stuck with me because Idra was an incredible macro player and really understood the mechanics of how to break some of the StarCraft. So here we're going to see the good old tried and true concept of mutas go one spot, Ling Bane goes another, but the Terran player is literally waiting for this. He's so ready. Throws a bunch of mines at the front, and this could get really gory. And a bunch of bio dies, and holy shit, look at that friendly fire. The Banes are going to come in. The Hellbat's doing a great job of tanking, and unfortunately there were just too many turrets there for the mutas to do anything. And Savagewood loses all of his mutas, which is just fucking brutal. And here, if we look at units, here, this is just brutal, because even though the Zerg is winning a little bit in workers because of the attack and the Banes, he's really going to hit a spot where the Terran just comes with this crushing army, and because he doesn't have mutas, which, like tanks, you build up a count throughout the game and you really need. The Zerg's going to have to defend with pure Lingbane, so this is a turning point in the game. I see this army coming, and I know how much economy he has relative to me, and crucially, I know, and this is the crux of the issue, this player is vulnerable to multitask, and he's not good at looking at his main army and attacking while he macros. So I say to myself, what would be more valuable, putting pressure on this guy and counterattacking his third, or keeping these 30 lings to engage into freaking Widow Mines with upgrades and Hellbats? So what do you think I do? I heckin' counterattack. And I have so much gas that I do elect to rebuild a few of the mutas. This is another shitty thing. Whenever you play inefficient TVZ, even if you have a good drone count, if you're always throwing away like huge Lingbane armies, you can actually float a bit of gas, which is not normal. Usually you would think the Zerg is the race that needs gas, but a lot of times you'll get up to 15 mutas and they have incredible just like what we saw this game. You get up to like 15 mutas, they have incredible defense everywhere, and suddenly, like on a normal map, you can find your spots with mutas, but this is a terrible map for mutas because of how close it is for T. Really good defense by this guy because these are the two spots you want to turret, and after that, like with one here too, like it's really hard. So that's why I'm low on minerals. And it's also obviously really bad to lose an entire control group of mutas, but you know, I was microing a game deciding engagement. So here, notice how it's shift A move and I didn't just A move, because if it's not a shift A move, buildings will just idle. You want them to break the depot down and keep fucking going, because in an engagement where you're being attacked and you're having to inject and keep your reinforcements from getting cut off and running into the army, you don't want to be messing with this garbage. They're Zerglings, like they're going to A move anyway. You have to focus fire, just do a shift command. In general, the shift key is one thing that newbies in StarCraft really underestimate and don't appreciate how fucking brutally powerful it is. In Brood War, it basically didn't even work because the AI was so bad. Speaking of bad, we can see me lose a few mutas for Frizzle. But notice I micro my links here to go into his mineral line because that's the priority, like I said in game 1, but then I shift click a couple out to focus the depots, which is sick. Good micro there by me. Speaking of micro, here's some bad micro. So we know that this guy's doing a fuck it push, and is basically the clock is on him, because remember there was damage done here. We can presume his main is almost mined out, so when we crush the third here, it actually becomes like, well, crap, now I have to do damage. That's the point of playing against people in TVZ like this. You, as Zerg, want to put them in the position where, when they do these pushes, which they will do incessantly, all game, you have to be able to say, okay, there's a timer on this. You better commit, do damage, or retreat, because if you don't, you're going to take X amount of damage. If you just defend, and never counter, never harass, these players will break you, because it'll just be one wave of mule hammer units after another, and even if their micro's not that good, if you never put yourself in a position where you can take the lead or stop their economy, it's just like, how are you ever going to win? You're going to tech to Broodlord and get dropped to death? You're going to tech to Ultra and get kited to death? No, you have to be able to be efficient in the mid game. So this is a great example of, I knew the guy wasn't able to multitask, and normally I might assume a guy is going to live tier and I move command lings into the nat and go from there, but because it's this guy and I have 2-2, I'm going to go ahead and focus fire the CC down, and remember that beautiful shift A command, that's going to be the game changer here. So I let him have the space, there's no drones here, it was just important I didn't be retarded and lose all the queens. And that base dies. So in this scenario, we're in the same situation we are before with the fuck it push, where we're just delay, and do as much damage with the counterattack and wait until he gets way up into our grill to attack. And what do we have going for us? A gaggle of queens, some banes with speed, and really a lot of creep. That's a huge part of playing against these people is creep. Because if they limit your creep spread early, my god, you'll never be able to crush their pushes and hold them off. This is the opposite of this, where you're sitting in a situation where they don't have enough fucking scan energy to ever not fight on creep, which is what you want. So he kills the space. I don't even consider defending it. A bit of a micro mistake here. But at this point, I was expecting like, oh, like 15 Marines to be here and to stop my counter. But when it's not, I'm like, oh yeah, he's screwed. And you might be saying, oh, he's floating so much. Well, you know, it was going to be really hard. Like, this just happened, this attack at his third. What is he going to do? He would have had the money to make one cycle of units. But this is what I'm talking about, is if you pressure people like this constantly, they're not going to be experienced or talented enough to like hit every macro cycle while they lose their third and all their depots and they're during the game deciding engagement. That's the whole point. It's so much easier for you as Zerg to do shift link counter attacks than it is for the Terran to like make these decisions of how much of my main army do I bring back? Is my stuff going to finish quick enough to stop the attack when all the units pump out? Like, is he going to reinforce? Like, you're really putting the pressure on them. And Terran players that play this style, they're so used to being able to put the pressure on you, the Zerg player. In fact, their entire style is predicated off of it. So we want him to just hard commit all the way. And of course, we're just going to lead with the Banes and crush his army. So what happened? Let's watch. Sorry about the music, my playlist got jacked up somehow. If only you could have lifted your third. See, and this is why I should have focus fired those depots, because right here, it might look like, well, he's an idiot and all he needs is like a few units at the top of the ramp. He can't, because I killed all those depots, remember? So now, this is officially like a fuck it push. He can't make units. He's like literally about to have his main overrun, and he can't make units. And every CC is lifted but this one, so he can't do a bunch of cooldowns. He doesn't really have that many depots to do cooldowns on. So let's watch his POV. Because this is in essence why doing this style and forcing him to multitask is good. Let's just rewind it a little. Okay, so he's defending. Oh no, more depots, I need to make stuff. Oh crap, I'm supply blocker. Oh no. See? Even the pro gamers in StarCraft think about this concept of knowing where someone's screen is going to be and taking advantage. See, I knew that he would be focused on his attack and therefore that counter was going to do significant damage. Wow, look how fucking far the creep spread is out on the map. So now he's just going to be kind of a chode, like sit in a choke point and like expect me to donate 1 million lings. It's like fall asleep at the keyboard or something. And here I'm kind of like rolling my eyes like, get out, what are you doing? And then I see the medevacs go, I know exactly what he's doing. So then he flies them into queens. So this is why creep is so important, because if you didn't have the whole map creeped, it would be like, his army's in medevacs, this is kind of scary, where's he going? He could drop here, and I mean, like, you're really not going to lose, but like, the whole map is creeped, so this just becomes like a farce. And then he starts to lead me into mines, and I start to get kind of worried, like, how many mines does this guy have strewn across the map? And I lose my queens here. That was sloppy Joe. There's one thing about queen defense though, is like one tiny little area remains uncreeped and then they're fucking worthless. So this is another good thing about creep, is notice because I have creep all the way up here, I can still see this guy's reinforcements. And this is like another thing about just having map control in general, is if you know when your Terran or Protoss opponent is continuing to reinforce, it can help you know whether to make links or drones, or fighting units or drones, which is like the bread and butter of Zerg. And in the same situation as last game, my counterattack did such devastating damage, I know that his capability to reinforce is highly limited. So even though he's very, very close to me, I just need to make sure not to die. And vexingly here, he had killed my Bane nest and I hadn't noticed. So I'm like trying to make Banes here to easily win the game and can't. You know, I'm a little nervous at this point. Not really, but I don't want to be in a situation where I take a bad mine hit and I suddenly can't make Banes. Because he's really setting up the mines here. Which is sort of funny because mines are better against Banes. If you literally just have like 1 million lings and running an army this size, the mines are going to do more harm than good. Like the mines pretty much killed almost every ling, but The self-splash is too much, and I knew that. And then after you lead with the mass sling, you just shift-click focus fire into the medis, and this guy says GG. I guess he knows the game is over, thanks for the games. So let me just say that this is how you're supposed to act in StarCraft if you have an issue with someone. Not how I'm acting, but how this Naza guy acted. Wasn't a dick. I just made a quip about his macro. He was like, you think so? Fine, let's 1v1. Of course I accepted. He followed through and didn't back out like a spineless rodent from the Confed clan. And you put yourself in a position where even if you lose, at least you tried to prove that you were better than your opponent. You put your money where your mouth was. And, you know, I mean, these are decent games, so props to this guy for having the stones to understand what a 1v1 game really means. And I hope this commentary was helpful as far as understanding how to deal with aggressive play, so sub for more.